Okay students, in this video we are going to start the one more part of the genetics, that's human genetic disorders. And in human genetic disorders I would like to start an example of autosomal recessive disorder, and the first example of autosomal recessive disorder I would like to give is phenylketonuria. This is my topic, guys. Phenylketonuria. So what do you mean by the phenylketonuria? Let me tell you, this phenylketonuria, it's an inborn, let me write, it's an inborn recessive metabolic disorder. So this phenylketonuria is an example of inborn recessive metabolic disorder. Inborn, that means it is present since the birth. Recessive, we have two types of traits so far as Mendelian genetics is concerned. One is dominant, another is recessive. So it is not the dominant character, it's not the dominant trait, it is recessive. And in recessive characters, what we have to understand, that two copies of gene, two alleles are required for the expression of the trait. That means this trait exists in the homozygous condition, not in the heterozygous condition. So if an individual is suffering from this disease, that's phenylketonuria, that individual should be homozygous for this trait, not heterozygous. Because recessive characters have an important character, that they show their expression only in the homozygous condition, not in the heterozygous condition. So it's an inborn, it is a recessive and metabolic disorder. This is one more point. This is metabolic disorder. Metabolic disorder means where the genes, where the alleles which are responsible for the trait, they encode for some enzymes. So the gene which is responsible for the character, responsible for the trait, that is encoding an enzyme. So that means in this genetic disorder, what you call as phenylketonuria, an enzyme is lacking, an enzyme is absent, which is responsible for an important metabolic reaction that we will discuss ahead. So first of all, we have to understand the basic concept of this phenylketonuria. So it is an inborn recessive metabolic disorder. Now, so far as the genes of this trait are concerned, the genes for this trait are present on, autosomes obviously. Now which autosome? The genes of this character are present on which autosome? The genes are present on chromosome number 12. So the genes for this character, the genes which are coding for some enzymes, are located on chromosome number 12. So there are two homologues of chromosome number 12, right? Let's say for example this chromosome number 12. There are two copies of chromosome number 12, and the genes for this character are present on the same chromosome, right? Now normally what these genes function, these genes which are located on the chromosome number 12, these genes code for an enzyme. The genes code for an enzyme. The genes code for an enzyme, and that enzyme is known as phenylalanine hydroxylase. So in normal conditions, that means if there is no this genetic disorder, what we call as phenylketonuria, these genes which are located on the chromosome number 12, they code for enzyme or enzymes, and the enzyme is phenylalanine hydroxylase. This is very, very important enzyme. How it is important? How this enzyme is important? Let me show you with the help of reactions. So this enzyme, this phenyl hydroxylase, literally I can say this enzyme phenyl hydroxylase, it is converting phenylalanine It is responsible for the conversion of phenylalanine into another amino acid, and that another amino acid is tyrosine. So there is conversion of one amino acid, that's phenylalanine, into another amino acid, that is tyrosine. So this is the reaction that is taking place in the human body, where an essential amino acid, that is phenylalanine, which is present in many foods, right? This phenylalanine gets converted into tyrosine, but this is only in presence of this enzyme. That enzyme is known as phenylalanine hydroxylase. So here is the concept that you have to understand. So if this enzyme is present, enzymes will be present when its genes will be present on the chromosome number 12, and they will code for this enzyme, right? They will code for this enzyme phenylalanine hydroxylase, and this phenylalanine hydroxylase will convert the phenylalanine into tyrosine. But now if we can also put a reaction here in order to show you what is the structure of this phenylalanine and what is the structure of the tyrosine, and you will understand the concept. Now let's say, for example, this is the structure of phenylalanine. This is phenylalanine, okay, this is phenyl ring, this is CH2, this is alpha carbon, and this is amino group here, let me tell you, and this is carboxylic group here. So this is the amino acid having this alpha carbon, this is beta carbon, and then here we have the phenyl ring. So in presence of this enzyme, whose genes are present on the chromosome number 12, in presence of this enzyme phenylalanine hydroxylase, this structure, this phenylalanine gets converted into, this is the structure, this is one more structure, right? And it is here CH2, CH, this is alpha carbon, and here we will put NH2 and carboxyl group. Now what is the difference between this one and this one? If you can see these structures, there is simple difference that this enzyme will add a hydroxyl group here, OH group here. And now this was phenylalanine, this is the structure of the phenylalanine, this is the structure of phenylalanine, and this is the structural formula of what? Tyrosine. This is the structure of tyrosine. So when the genes of the chromosome number 12 are present, genes for this enzyme phenyl hydroxylase, in presence of phenyl hydroxylase, this phenylalanine will get converted into tyrosine, right? Now we have to understand the problem that is lying in the phenylketonuria. In an individual having this disorder, having this inborn disorder, what we call as phenylketonuria. An individual, a newborn baby, is having this disease called phenylketonuria. What is the problem with this individual? The problem with the individual is that his chromosome number 12 is lacking both the copies of genes. The genes which are encoding this enzyme, that is phenylalanine hydroxylase. So you have to keep in mind you have to understand the concept that individual who is having this disorder, who is having this trait, who is having this character phenylketonuria, on his chromosome or her chromosome number 12, both the copies of genes, both the alleles are either absent or missing, or generally mutated. So both the copies of the gene which are coding for the phenyl hydroxylase are mutated, they are defective, and as a result this enzyme, that is phenylalanine hydroxylase, which is responsible for the conversion of phenylalanine into tyrosine, is not present, it is absent. So what will happen? This conversion of phenylalanine into tyrosine, that I have shown you with the help of reaction So this conversion is not taking place. This metabolic reaction is blocked here because this enzyme is absent. And you know why this enzyme is absent? Because it is genes on the chromosome number 12 are lacking. They are mutated, they are defective. So what is happening here? What is taking place here? This phenylalanine, which should get converted into tyrosine, it is accumulated. There is accumulation of this phenylalanine in the blood and in the body fluids. So due to the absence of this enzyme, due to the lack of this enzyme or enzymes, phenylalanine hydroxylase, this phenylalanine which should get converted into tyrosine is blocked here, the reaction is blocked here, and this phenylalanine is accumulated. There is accumulation of phenylalanine in blood and other body fluids like cerebrospinal fluid, body fluids. So there is accumulation of this phenylalanine in blood and body fluids. And you know, this phenylalanine, once it gets accumulated in the blood and body fluids, it sometimes, generally, most often, it gets converted into some other toxic compounds. For example, this phenylalanine, which is now getting accumulated in the blood and the body fluids, it sometimes converts into phenyl acetate. This is one of the metabolite of the phenylalanine, and another metabolite is phenyl lactate. These are very toxic compounds. These are both ketone bodies and they are very toxic to the various organs of the body, right? And they are resulting the many kinds of signs and symptoms in the patient who is having this phenylketonuria, that we have to understand in signs and symptoms. So first of all, you understand here, when the genes on the chromosome number 12 are defective or mutated, so they are not coding for this enzyme phenylalanine hydroxylase, and as a result there is no conversion of phenylalanine into tyrosine, and this phenylalanine, it is accumulated in the blood and the body fluids, and then this phenylalanine, it can convert into other metabolites like phenyl acetate and phenyl lactate, which are causative agents of various problems in the individual, that I will discuss in the signs and symptoms, right? But here you have to understand the important point that since it is autosomal recessive disorder, so we need 2 copies of genes. So that means both the copies should be mutated, both the copies should be defective. If one of the copy is normal, for example, then this disorder will not appear. Then it will exist in the heterozygous condition, not in the homozygous condition. So then this disorder generally do not show its characteristic features. So you have to here keep in mind this disorder, phenylketonuria, it will only appear, it will only show its symptoms and signs in the individual when both the copies are mutated, when both the copies are defective. That means it should exist in homozygous condition. The trait should exist in homozygous condition, then and only these different symptoms of this genetic disorder will appear in the individual. Now what symptoms, what signs? So we will discuss the signs and symptoms of phenylketonuria. So let me rub this first. So what are the signs and symptoms of phenylketonuria? What are the signs and symptoms of phenylketonuria? So let me write here signs and symptoms. Signs and symptoms. Signs and symptoms of phenylketonuria. One of the important, serious, I should say, symptom of, sign of phenylketonuria is there is impairment. There is impairment of brain development. So it affects the brain. In the baby, where the phenylalanine gets accumulated in the blood or in the body fluids, and it is since the birth, that means once the baby is born, there is accumulation of phenylalanine in his or her blood, because the baby is lacking the enzymes for conversion of phenylalanine into tyrosine. So because of this accumulation of phenylalanine, there is impairment of the brain development. Impairment of the brain development. Here you have to understand a very important point. Although this phenylalanine is an essential amino acid, you know this, but there is a proverb in English, let me tell you, that sometimes the nectar, which is very, very important, right? The nectar, if given in excess, is sometimes poisonous. So excess of everything is bad. This is one more thing. So here again is the same case, that phenylalanine, which is a very, very important amino acid, essential amino acid, but once it gets accumulated in excess in the blood or in the body fluids, it results various symptoms, various problems. And one of the problem is impairment of the brain development. And this individual whose brain is impaired, whose various parts of the brain, cerebrum, are impaired, there are some problems like he or she develops seizures. He or she develops seizures. The individual develops seizures. The individual develops seizures. Seizures means there are some changes. There are some changes in the there are some change in the electric activities of brain. Activities of brain. There are some changes in the electric activities of the brain, and as a result of that, there are some shaking movements. Some shaking, involuntary shaking movements of the body. Shaking movements of body, jerky movements of the body. And when there are shaking and jerky movements of the body, the person can even become conscious after this episode of seizure or seizures repeatedly, right? So there are some shaking or jerky movements in the body because the problem lies with the brain, right? Second is that because of the accumulation of this phenylalanine and its metabolites, which are very toxic than the phenylalanine itself, so there is hypopigmentation of skin. There is hypopigmentation of skin and hairs. So they need, actually, for the pigmentation, for the color, they need a very, very important pigment. You know that pigment is known as melanin. And let me tell you, this melanin is synthesized from the tyrosine, which is one of the important metabolite if the phenylalanine is converted into tyrosine. But you know that the problem is, in the metabolic reaction, the phenylalanine is not converted into tyrosine, so there is no precursor for this melanin. When there is no precursor for this melanin, so this melanin is not synthesized properly. As a result, there is this hypopigmentation of skin and hair. And one more thing is there, that is due to the accumulation of this phenyl acetate, as I mentioned in my topic. Phenyl acetate is one of the metabolites of phenylalanine when it gets accumulated. Due to the accumulation of phenyl acetate, there is musty odor or smell, you can say. There is musty, mouse like smell, I mean to say, musty odor or smell in urine and sweat. So there is musty odor in the sweat, there is musty odor in the urine due to the accumulation of phenyl acetate, which is one of the metabolite of phenylalanine, right? So these are some symptoms, these are some signs when the phenylalanine and its metabolites get accumulated in the blood and the body fluids, right? Now the next thing that we need to understand regarding this topic, that is how we can diagnose this disorder, phenylketonuria. How we can go for the diagnosis. So far as diagnosis is concerned, so far as diagnosis of this disorder are concerned, there are various tests, there are various diagnostic procedures that we need to go through. So diagnosis, let me write here, diagnosis, how we can diagnose. how we can screen the individual who is having the phenylketonuria, right? So one of the tests of this phenylketonuria is known as ferric chloride test. Ferric chloride test, right? Ferric chloride test. What we do in this test? In this test, we take urine sample. We take urine sample, okay? Urine sample. And we, in this urine sample, we add this, ferric chloride. Ferric chloride. Generally, if the urine doesn't contain the phenylalanine, for example, if there is no phenylalanine in the urine, the individual is not suffering from this disease, phenylketonuria. So the urine is generally yellow in color. Normally, the urine of the individual is yellow in color. But if the individual is having this phenylketonuria, whose blood and urine both contains lot of phenylalanine and phenyl acetate, right, metabolites, so this yellow color, in presence of this ferric chloride, the color of the urine becomes green. So when the color of the urine becomes green, we come to know that the individual is having this phenylketonuria because his or her urine contains phenylalanine or phenyl acetate, which reacts with the ferric chloride, and as a result there is appearance of this green color. So appearance of this green color detects the presence of phenylalanine and phenyl acetate in the urine. So this is one test. This is one of the tests. For this we can directly, for example, if we want to screen a baby who is born, newly born baby, we can simply add the ferric chloride to the diapers which have some concentration of urine, and the diaper in presence of ferric chloride becomes, the urine becomes yellow. The color will be from yellow to green. But if that baby is having this phenylketonuria, right? Now another test for diagnosis of this phenylketonuria is known as Guthrie test. It is the name of the Dr. Guthrie, Robert Guthrie, who developed this test to screen, to detect the presence of phenylalanine in the blood of the patient. And in this test what we do, we use a bacteria. In this test we use a bacteria that's known as Bacillus subtilis. And what is the character of this bacteria? This bacteria, it has been proved that this bacteria generally grow, it produces so many colonies if its growth medium is having phenylalanine. If the growth medium contains this phenylalanine. So that means there is much growth of this Bacillus subtilis in presence of phenylalanine. Now try to understand what we are doing. We take blood sample, okay? We take blood sample of the baby. For this we can prick the heel of the baby with the help of a needle, and we can take some drops of blood, and these blood drops are added to the culture of this bacteria, Bacillus subtilis. And obviously when we add this sample to the Bacillus subtilis, whose growth is accelerated in presence of phenylalanine, so obviously if the blood contains large quantity of phenylalanine, the growth of this bacteria is accelerated. And when we see that the growth of the bacteria Bacillus subtilis is accelerated, it increases, that means there is presence of phenylalanine in excess in the blood of the patient, right? So this is another test. This is first one where we use the ferric chloride, another is known as Guthrie test. But nowadays, because there is much advancement in the techniques of molecular biology and cell biology, so nowadays we simply have some automated techniques where the test is done within minutes, within seconds, right? One of the important technique is known as mass spectrometry. So this is nowadays used to detect the presence of phenylalanine in the various samples, whether we take the urine as a sample or blood. So these are some diagnostic procedures, tests, with the help of which we can detect the presence of phenylalanine and its metabolites in the blood or urine of the patient, right? So this is all about the diagnosis. Lastly, we have to understand, is there any treatment? Is there any treatment for this phenylketonuria? So let us discuss the treatment. What about the treatment of this disorder? So far as the treatment is concerned, there is no treatment for this phenylketonuria. It's incurable. It's not curable because it is genetic disorder, and there is one way to treat this patient, that we have to replace the enzymes. That means the enzymes which are lacking phenyl hydroxylase, which are lacking in the body, they should be given to the patient. But this is a very tough process. It's very expensive process, and it is usually not done, right? It's not usually used. So the simple treatment for the ketonuria, once we diagnose this, if there is early diagnosis, one of the important treatment for this phenylketonuria is that removal of phenylalanine, phenylalanine from the diet. If the phenylalanine is removed from the diet, that means the diet which is free from the phenylalanine. When the diet is free from the phenylalanine, obviously there will be no accumulation of phenylalanine in the blood or body fluids. But it is again very tough process, because most of the foods which are generally rich in the protein rich foods, for example, and generally those which are taken by the babies or children, they are fond of these foods. For example, the burgers, chicken burgers, nuts, for example, pizza. So these are the foods which are generally liked by the children. So if a baby or a child is suffering from this disorder, phenylketonuria, right, we have to stop these foods. We have to remove these foods from her diet, right? Burgers, nuts and pizza, because they contain a lot of quantity of phenylalanine. So this diet plan, which is very tough process, but if we go for this, we can stop the symptoms and the problems that appear because of the accumulation of phenylalanine. And nowadays some synthetic diets, once it is diagnosed, for example in a baby, many countries use the diagnosis. Once there is birth of the baby, they go for the diagnosis, they go for the screening, and once they come to know that there is phenylketonuria, they stop these diets of the baby, and they provide some synthetic diet to the baby. That synthetic diet which is free from the phenylalanine. So this is the only way we can stop the symptoms and the signs of the phenylketonuria. This is the treatment. So in this video we discussed a very important example of genetic disorder, that's known as phenylketonuria, which is an example of inborn recessive metabolic disorder. And in recessive disorder, let me tell you again, lastly, in recessive disorder, both the genes should be defective. Both the genes should be mutated. If there is one gene normal, then it is heterozygous condition, and in heterozygotes, these symptoms, these problems generally do not appear. Thank you for watching.